Okay, we're recording, David. So
Yeah.
coming into the show in three, two, one. Welcome to this special episode of Radio Free Professional Wrestling. It is I, Shawn, with my tag team partner, David, and we're here today to review The Iron Claw. Now, this is the movie that me and David saw live in person when David was over here in Knoxville back in January. And I have been able to see it for a second time now, as it is on HBO Max right now. And David, the second time watching this movie, hit me just as hard as the first time I saw this movie.
Yeah. Well, irrelevant of the quality of the movie. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and bienvenue, welcome, coming to you to everyone. The beauty of this movie for me, not only is it a very rare wrestling movie that was a big time release. As you already said, I got to see it in Knoxville. At the local cinema in Knoxville, and just going to the cinema in America was an experience. Let alone whether I've gone to see Bambi, Kung Fu Panda 4, or a movie about the Von Erichs. It was a fantastic experience, and I managed to stay away for most of it as well. Even, I think you only elbowed me in the mush once, which was nice. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and it isn't it as we'll go on to, it has its issues, but it has, we both felt, genuinely tried to be almost like a wrestling buyout rather than a Hollywood movie.
I honestly feel like when they flash up inspired based on the true story of the Von Erichs, you need to look at that first word inspired, as this is a 2 hour and 12-minute trip. And to me personally, David, I would say this is a movie about a group of brothers and a family who have suffered tragedy after tragedy after tragedy with professional wrestling in the background.
Yeah, that's the way it's portrayed. Certainly in this movie. I mean, I don't think this movie brings us any closer to the truth of what really happened. But what it does do, it picks most of the major incidents in the sad lives of the brothers and the family, and it doesn't beat around the bush with them. I think that's fair to say, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so this movie starts out, the first scene of it is black and white. You think it's the sports auditorium and it's the father, Fritz, wrestling, and it's black and white. And you get introduced to the father of the family and his, I would say, almost like Moby Dick captain level of insanity and quest for the world title. Like, this is what drives this gentleman. Is like he wants to be a world champion, and he's never able to do it in real life. So now he becomes a toxic sports parent, and he has 5 sons, all who come into wrestling, and he just wants one of them to capture this title for the family, i.e., him.
Yeah, and you can imagine that being almost the case as we get deeper into this film and some of the problems that the obsession, which obviously at the time, when as the Von Erichs were growing, as the family was growing, wrestling was life. You were involved in it. It was obviously still a time of the territories. They don't hide that, but they actually try to portray how wrestling is just more important than anything.
Exactly, David. Especially to Fritz. I feel like Fritz was like the company first, then his family second. And do you remember the scene where they're at the dinner table and he's literally ranking his sons in order and like, hey, by the way, the rankings can always change.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you can imagine that going on. You really, really can imagine that going on. That's one of the more. I mean, I've not been part of a big family like that, so I've never had to deal with something like that. But yeah, you can imagine him in the world of wrestling, absolutely doing it.
So I can say the mother in the movie to me felt like she was the atypical Christian family mother, right? She was there to support the kids, but always deferred to the judgment of the father, the head of the table, if you want to say, in the family. Because there's a scene where Kevin comes to his mom and goes like, "Hey, dad is pushing one of the sons just a little too hard. You need to talk to him." And she's like, "You guys need to settle it yourself."
Yeah, I don't want to cast aspersions, but it is almost the stereotypical. She's the stereotypical role mum, in that I'm here to cook dinner. Whenever the boys are home, I'm here. I'll put dinner on the place. I'll keep the house clean and tidy. And and I'm not here for it. I'm not going to interfere. It's boys will be boys. You go and deal with that over there, and I'm gonna, I'm just gonna be here cleaning, washing, and it's very, very role specific. I think you'd say, Sean, and it was like with some of the tragedies that you're going to go on and talk about that befall this family that we know to be true. It's like you really should have maybe just put your foot down, young lady, earlier. But as you said with Fritz, would you?
True. I feel like he ruled that family with an iron fist. No pun intended. And I don't know if I could live or survive in that environment. This is the thing about it myself.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously it's different. Um, it's different in this day and age, but I don't know. You've got to think of. I mean, the Von Erichs were unique in the fact that even the Johnson family, if the Rock's dad, um, there wasn't that many brothers. This is a unique family in that there was just so many brothers, and he could actually do that. Fritz, he could say around and say, right, Kelly, you're number one, Kevin, you're number two, etc., etc. And I can't recall another family off the top of my head that that had the five brothers, and any one of them could have, taken a world championship and run with it. So he almost is like, well, staying on top dog. He's almost fighting with his sons, keeping them in order, so he is the top dog, and he can dictate to them, right, Kelly, you're going there this week. Kevin, you're going there. All of it. It was really, really weird, but you get the feeling that it was quite accurate.
Yeah, I would say so. Now, the good part of this movie, the one that made me have a little bit more about good feeling about it, is the bond the brothers had with each other. They were thick as thieves, as we would say. There's a scene where Kevin and his girlfriend Pam are helping to sneak out the other Von Erich because he wants to go play at this concert, and his family said no. So here you see Pam get into the truck, put it in neutral, and the four brothers are pushing the truck away from the house before Pam kickstarts it, and they drive away, and they take the brother, over to the concert. Take his feet, as we say.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it was, and the bond between the brothers was proven as the longer the movie went on, and the more, almost like, if you like, tragedy hits the family, which again is well documented. The movie doesn't hide from it, fortunately. Um, and the brothers stuck together. They always pretty much understood why these incidents had taken place and supported each other. But they are, unfortunately, that incident that that scene that you've just described is one of the more lighter moments of what is, if you weren't a wrestling fan, could be considered quite a depressing movie.
Okay, so yeah, the first, I want to say, 30 minutes to 40 minutes of the movie is lighthearted. It needs to be lighthearted because it's about to hit you with a gut punch after a gut punch after a gut punch.
Yeah,
So we get to Pam and Kevin's wedding, and it's the first signs we see of his older brother David being sick. And Kevin finds him in the bathroom. He's throwing up blood. David is about to go to Japan to wrestle. Now, this was crunched down time wise in real life because there's like really 3 years difference here between the time that Pam and Kevin got married. Then David unfortunately passes away. And David is the first death in the movie that we've seen, even though the
yeah,
Von Erichs had already suffered two tragedies. The young son, Jackie, died at 7 when he got electrocuted when he touched like the tongue of the trailer home that was on the back of the car, and he fell into a
Yeah,
puddle
that's right.
and
Yeah,
drowned. Because
yeah,
we see a scene where Pam and Kevin were having their first date, and Pam kind of refers to Kevin as the older brother, and Kevin was really fast to correct, like, "No, I'm the second oldest. I had an older brother," and he explains the story. Now, the one death we
yeah.
don't see in the go ahead.
Yeah, no, no. No, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that isn't a death that's shown. It's referred to, and you're right. The one criticism, one there's not many criticisms I'd actually have of this movie. There's one that involves the nature boy that has been genuinely panned, and they just made a mistake there. But that I'm sure we'll come on to that. It's the timeline. The timeline does jump. It does take a few little liberties with with how it felt, because you actually picked up on a couple that I missed when we were dissecting it in the taxi on the way home. The timeline jumping isn't great, and if you're a historian like you are, particularly is this is your era and your area, if you like, you were you were actually a handy encyclopedia to have next to me whilst I'm watching the movie. Oh, excuse me.
See, yeah, because we were leaving the theater, and I turned to you, and I just go like, this is when I coined that phrase, like, this is a movie about a family with the wrestling in the background. Because if you go in like a diehard wrestling fan, you're gonna sit there and you're gonna nitpick the timeline. And I was like, I'm not gonna do it. It was a good, powerful movie, and I told you I had to process this because leaving the theater, it was a heavy weight on your shoulders whenever you saw this movie.
Yes, it was, because it did not give you a happy ending, did it? It really. And again, spoilers. Obviously, there's going to be spoilers. This is a movie review. It did not give you a happy ending, did it?
We'll get to the ending of the actual movie and the way I personally kind of liked it. But so we get David go over to Japan, and the next thing we see is actually Kevin coming over to the family home, and Fritz is at the table, and he looks sad. I mean, like, for the first time in the movie, you see this iron statue that is a father based on our visually sad, and Kevin asks what's wrong, and he has to explain to Kevin that David passed away in the hotel in Japan, and that's the first death we've seen. And now we're on this roller coaster of, is there really a Von Erich curse?
Yeah, without a doubt there is. This movie, if ever, I mean, this question has been brought up time and time again by wrestling fans, particularly in the area where you live, and yeah, without a doubt there was. No shadow of a doubt of what, and particularly watching this movie and knowing what was accurate and what wasn't, what was a little bit tenuous, and it was only timelines really that were tenuous. Without a doubt, there is a Von Erich curse for me.
I can't imagine a family going through more tragedy than this family, the Von Erich family. As we get to what we don't see is Chris committing suicide during the timeline. Chris is not in the movie, and I was happy with the director's decision not to show another death in the family because we see at least three, and I felt like three was enough.
Yeah.
I think you would literally need to have a therapist there at the theater if he had shown all four families members passing away in this movie.
The thing is, again, you cast your mind back to our viewing, my friend. I'd completely forgotten about Chris. I was still sort of like a little bit numb at the ending, and I know you're going to come on to it. And then again, we got in the cab, and you again mentioned they didn't even, you just casually turned, looked at me, and went, Dave, they didn't even show Chris's death. And I was suddenly, the penny dropped at that point. And I said to you, no, they didn't, did they? Christ, what a depressing movie that would have been if they'd have added that in. So you're right in the respect of, I'm actually glad they didn't.
True. Now we do they okay, so the next thing we see is um Kerry Von Erich, the Texas Tornado. He gets a motorcycle. He's driving down this lonely Texas road, and the next thing we see is him suffering the accident and him getting an amputation. Now they did a little bit more in the movie than what happened in real life. And growing up, I didn't know Kerry Von Erich had lost like his foot in this accident, and he was still wrestling. I didn't know that until I saw the movie. I went, "Oh my word! I can't believe this guy actually was able to do a career after having this major accident."
Now, that's one thing where I actually, for once, had the advantage on you in this story. Yeah, I actually knew that going into watching this, but it was good because that for me is quite an important point. Because for me, as a British gentleman who loved his wrestling of that era and at the time, the first time the Von Erichs initially came to my attention was through the Texas Tornado, because he was the one that we first saw over here in the UK. And then, being the wrestling nut that I was, and was to be, I then went digging into this family of American wrestlers who, there wasn't just this one guy, because you'd hear the references to his brothers and the history of the family. And I sort of, ironically, I made that statement earlier about the family. I suppose you could look at the Hearts, but as being probably the only other family that had multiple wrestlers as sons from a father and mother. But um, it was weird. That was weird because, again, it was almost quite casual how they did that, Sean. I don't know how you felt about that.
I kind of felt like maybe it was the portrayal of it. I can see why you want to do a larger effort or larger expectation, so you can get the shock value in the theater of seeing Carrie without the bottom part of his leg. Okay, cool, fine. It gives you the sense of the story, and it just shows how this film was so driven to be in professional wrestling. We can get to Mike. Mike was the son in the movie who kind of shared some traits of Chris, and I felt the worst for Mike because I felt like Mike didn't want to be in wrestling. He wanted to pursue his career in music, but he does the thing. He joined the brothers. They have a good run, and he gets hurt. He has a shoulder injury. He goes to get surgery, and unfortunately, he was unlucky. He suffers this medical issue, has a temperature of 107 degrees, goes into a coma. Luckily, he comes out of the coma, but he's not the same as he was before. And honestly, I feel like that event leads him down the road to follow his brother in committing suicide.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Now, you could look at all of these stories individually, even the ones they didn't show, like Chris. But Mike, to me, is the most tragic because he wasn't a wrestler, and he was, to me, a victim of the ultimate Fritz bullying, because Fritz he physically needed another Von Erich in the ring, whereas quite clearly, Mike's future lay elsewhere, but he was almost bullied into becoming a wrestler, going into the ring, and yeah, he was good at it. He had the genes, he had the blood, he had the DNA, yeah, etc. But yeah, it was that to me was one of the more tragic events of a lot of tragic events. That makes any form of sense.
David, we're in the theater. We're looking at the scene of the press conference where after he wakes up for the coma, and they're asking him if he's going to come back to wrestling. And I'm going like, hi, guy was in a coma. I think his career may be over if you're thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it wasn't pretty. Let's put it like that. And I, I admire the movie maker for actually, and the legacy of the family for allowing that to be told, because it's not pretty.
Okay, so we're heading towards the end of the movie here as Carrie Vire comes home before Christmas with a random girl he's dating at the time, and he presents his father a present. And his father doesn't want to open it just yet because it's not Christmas. The family is super religious. Christmas is Christmas. You celebrate on Christmas. But Fritz opens it up and it's a pistol. And it's foreshadowing. And I knew as soon as I saw the pistol, I'm going like, oh, this is how we're going to introduce the fact that later on in the timeline, Carrie Viner gets in a little bit of trouble with the law over persistent medication. He's eventually going to be tried and about to go to jail, and he decides to take his own life. And it's not like in the movie where it's on the buyer's property, but the fact that in the movie they decided to do it on the family's estate, it was so freaking powerful. And the fact that Kevin is coming to find his brother and literally carries him back into the family home and puts him on the kitchen table.
Yeah, I mean the end. You said it earlier on in the. You said it earlier on in this piece. The ending to the movie is hugely, hugely powerful, and it is on the edge of your seats. And the fact that it's based on real life makes it all the more powerful, uncomfortable, compulsive. Choose your adjective. Really, I don't know which one to use, but it was really there was no eyes leaving the screen at this point. And yeah, it was unpleasantly compulsive. I think is how I would say. You know, I wanted to look away but couldn't.
Exactly, David. I felt the same way. Now, this is where some people have an issue with the ending because we're hearing Carrie Von Eyre's voice as is he's reading the suicide note that he left, and we're fading into this like this afterlife sequence where he's on a boat, like a rowboat, sailing across this to the other side, and he's meeting his brothers. And to me personally, it this was the moment I needed because it's like a reunion of the brothers, and we needed some kind of I wouldn't say happy ending, but just something positive. Maybe like you know what he did get what he wished, even though he took his own life. He got back with his brothers on the other side
Yeah,
in heaven, and this is a strongly Christian family who believed in this. So I needed this. I needed someone to just grasp onto like maybe there's the afterlife, and this family, these set of brothers, were able to reunite in the afterlife and spend eternity together. Because this movie was so freaking sad, and if they didn't do this like afterlife scene and or finish the movie with Kevin with his two sons, and the sons turn to him and go like, "We'll be your brothers." I needed both of those to make this movie bearable.
yeah, absolutely. You couldn't have summed that up better. And it needed something. I tell you the word I'd use, Sean. A scene of hope
Yeah,
is
yeah,
what
hope.
is the phrase I would use. Unfortunately, the subject matter here, it's not. If you're going into this, if you're a wrestling fan, you've got to know a little bit about the family and the Von Erich curse, as you mentioned earlier, because you ain't going in getting Kung Fu Panda 4 here. You really aren't. You're getting the story of a family steeped in wrestling history. You're getting the story of a family steeped in tragedy that continued to go on and on and on. And with one or two exceptions, this movie slaps you in the face time after time after time. So don't expect to come out of it with a good feeling. I enjoyed this movie in the respect of I thought it was well made. I thought reasonably accurate, probably 75% accurate. There are one or two laugh out loud moments that they didn't intend to, and that's with their casting of some of the characters around the time, i.e., the guy who plays Ric Flair should have never been allowed near the movie set. But that was just a mistake. Fortunately, it was only a short scene and it didn't ruin the movie. It just made us laugh for the wrong reasons. But yeah, would I recommend this movie? Yes, particularly if you're listening to this podcast. It means you're a wrestling fan. Would I recommend this movie if you wanted cheering up or you'd had a bad day? No, stay the hell away from it.
You know, I put it on our Instagram account. I was like, "How do you rate this movie?" I gave it 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars, and 2 and 1. So I had a few votes. and it was like either 3 or 4. So, you know what? I'm kind of right in the middle. It's like 3.5 to me. This is a 3.5 movie. And I say, if you're a wrestling fan, know the history, you go into this, I think you come out with a better appreciation of Kevin Von Erich. I do personally. I feel like Kevin Von Erich has a very strong will. He has a very strong faith because you would have to have these to go through this and come out the other side and be still Kevin Von Erich. His sons are in professional wrestling, and he got what he wanted. His family all lives there on a big old ranch. So I'm very happy with Kevin because at least he has a little bit of a good after everything he went through, and that's all I hope for is him having a joyous, happy into like rest of his life.
I enjoyed the movie because it's enlightening. It's enlightening about the story, and with the fact that you said that it was pretty factual in the way that it was done, and it's pretty factual in the way the story that I knew. So yeah, I enjoyed this movie, but only simply because I'm a wrestling fan and like looking into historic wrestling stories. As a cheer up Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon story. Oh, we'll stick the iron claw on. No, don't do it. Don't do it at all. But for us, yeah, it was well, for me, the whole experience was fascinating. Going into an American cinema, having a table to put my popcorn on, having a swivel seat that could have fitted 3 people, and that even includes me. In it, it was just a wonderful experience, and I thank you for that because it was one of the trips out that made my Knoxville soiree unforgettable. So, but yeah, if you're a wrestling fan, yes. If you're not, no, because you'll end up coming out very, very depressed.
Well, the Iron Claw is out on HBO Max now. If you have the Max service, I would recommend you at least look at this if you're a wrestling fan. And if you have like 2.5 hours to dedicate to just sit and watch this movie, I feel like you'll have a more appreciation of the family coming out of it, especially the brothers.
100%. 100%. It's also available now in the UK for our UK listeners on Sky Store. If you happen to have the Sky Network and also Ratacan and all the other necessary new movie streaming sites. So yeah, you can see this. It won't be long before it's on Sky Cinema here in the UK.